She was the kind of woman a room forgot the moment she left it. The frost had come early to Millbrook that year, hard and white and merciless, and it lay over the churchyard of St. Bride's like a shroud laid down before its time. The smell of the morning was old stone and wet yew, and the thin sweet rot of leaves gone soft under ice. Somewhere past the lich gate a rook called once, then went silent, as if even the birds had decided the cold was not worth the argument. Eliza Prentice walked the path between the graves, with her work-basket on her arm and her breath going up in ribbons. She was 26, and not pretty, not by the town's accounting, though her hands were the finest in the parish, for reasons no one troubled to admire. She mended. She had mended since she was a girl of 10, sitting at her mother's knee with a needle too big for her fingers, and she had gone on mending, after there was no mother left to sit beside. She asked 5 pence for what other women charged a shilling, and she did the work so that no seam showed, so that no one could tell where the tear had been. People brought her their second-best coats and their only good shirts, and never once asked how she managed on what she charged. She was not rich. She was not admired. She was, in the way of most useful things, taken for granted. The bishop's frost was going to take someone before the week was out. She had heard it said in the baker's queue, said again outside the smithy, said a third time by the sexton, who ought to have known better than to say such things, where the wind could carry them straight to the churchyard porch, where old Tam Higgins slept. Tam had no family that anyone living remembered. He had lost the use of his legs in some war whose name he could no longer keep straight, and he begged at the lich gate through the winters, and did small jobs of weeding through the summers. And Millbrook regarded him, the way it regarded the frost itself, as an unfortunate and permanent feature of the season. Children were told not to stare. Grown men gave him a coin sometimes, and hurried on before he could thank them. The rector preached charity from the pulpit on Sundays, and stepped past Tam's blanket on the church steps every single week, without once slowing his stride. Eliza slowed. She always slowed. It cost her nothing but a moment, and a moment was the one thing she had never learned to be stingy with. That particular morning she saw the blanket first. It lay across Tam's knees the way it always did, gray wool gone the color of old dishwater, and it had torn clean across the middle sometime in the night, so that the wind came straight through the gap and found the man's legs beneath it. Tam had pulled the 2 halves together with his own fists and was holding them there, knuckles white, not complaining. He never complained. That, she thought, was the saddest thing about him. He had stopped expecting enough of the world to complain when it failed him. She did not ask him if he was cold. She could see that he was. She knelt down on the frozen stone without a thought for her one good skirt, and she took the needle case from her basket, and she began, right there in the churchyard, with the bells not yet done ringing the quarter hour, to mend the tear in a blanket that belonged to a man who could not pay her and would never have thought to ask. The needle was cold enough to sting her fingers. She did not stop for that either. Above them, inside the church, in the high-shadowed gallery pew that had stood empty of Ash family blood for the better part of 3 years, a man sat very still and watched her through the clouded glass of the side door, which someone had left standing a hand's width open against the damp. He had come to Millbrook the night before, quietly, with no outriders and no notice sent ahead, because he could not yet bear the noise that would follow if the town knew the Duke of Harwick had finally come home. He had told the innkeeper his name was Gideon Ash, and left it at that, which was true enough, since Ash was his family's name before it was ever anyone's title, and he had slipped into the gallery pew that morning, meaning only to sit a quarter hour in a church his father had built, and think about nothing at all. He had not expected to see a woman kneel in the frost to mend a beggar's blanket, as though the man beneath it were the last king of England. He did not move from the shadow of the pew. He did not want her to see him and change what she was doing because she was seen. She worked in silence. Her stitches were small and sure and very fast, and when the tear was closed, she did not rise at once. She reached into her basket and drew out a second thing, a folded square of flannel she had meant, he would learn much later, for her own worn petticoat, and she tucked it beneath the mended blanket, against the old man's knees, without a word. "Bless you, miss," Tam said. "Bless you for it." "I would have done it for anyone," Eliza said, and drew her hand back gently, and did not look as if she wanted thanking at all. "Mind you don't let the wet in again. Fold it under, not over." She did not know then that the man who would one day put a ring on her finger was sitting not 30 feet above her, in the cold gallery of his own family's church, learning in that single ordinary quarter hour everything he would ever need to know about who she was. If you have found your way to this story, take a moment now and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. Now, back to Millbrook, and to the frost, and to the woman who did not yet know she had been seen. Tam thanked her 3 more times before she left the churchyard, and 3 more times she told him to hush, that it was nothing, that any Christian soul would have done the same on such a morning. She did not believe that any Christian soul would have. She had watched them not do it for years, but she said it anyway, because to say otherwise would have sounded like pride, and pride was a thing she had never been able to afford. She went on to Mrs. Halloway's shop with the mending in her basket and thought no more of it. It was the kind of thing she did the way other people breathed, without noticing the doing. Gideon Ash sat a long while after she had gone, in the cooled gallery, with the door still standing open and the frost creeping in along the floor. He was 33 years old, and grief had made an old man of him in places no looking-glass could show. His brother had died 18 months past, of a fever that took 4 days to do its work, and Gideon had come into a dukedom he had never asked for, and a house he had not slept in since he was a boy. He had been 3 years abroad before that, in places where the wars were fought with less ceremony than in London drawing-rooms, and he had come home from all of it with a face that did not smile easily, and a habit of watching before he spoke. He had also come home carrying the memory of a woman named Sybil Marchmont, to whom he had once been promised, who had wept prettily at their parting and, not 2 hours later, boxed a housemaid's ears for spilling a candle's worth of wax on her gown. He had seen it by accident, through a half-open door, the way he had seen Eliza Prentice through a half-open door this morning, and the 2 memories sat now side by side in him, like a wound and its opposite. He did not know the mending woman's name yet. He meant to learn it. He rose at last and went down through the side door into the yard, and Tam Higgins was still there, working his gnarled fingers over the new seam in wonder. "Good morning to you," Gideon said. He did not give his title. He rarely gave it to strangers now, not out of shame, but because he had learned, in the space of 1 winter morning, that a man's name alone told him more about the world than his name and his rank together ever could. "Mornin', sir." Tam squinted up at him. "Fine mornin' for them as has a fire to go back to." "Who mended that for you?" "Miss Prentice." Tam said it the way a man says the name of a saint he has decided, privately, to keep. "Comes by most mornings. Never takes a farthing for it. Told me once she'd have done it for anyone." He laughed, a dry rattle of a laugh. "I told her most anyone's wouldn't have crossed the road." Gideon looked at the mended blanket for a long moment. The stitches were nearly invisible. "Where does she live?" "Above the Chandlers, sir. Prentice, her name is. Eliza Prentice." Gideon said nothing further. He gave Tam a coin, quietly, and told him not to make a show of it, and walked back toward the inn with the name sitting in him, the way a coal sits in a grate long after the flame has gone, giving off heat without any light to show for it. That same afternoon, without setting foot near the chandler's shop, he sent his steward, a careful grey man named Mr. Foss, to the almshouse warden, with instructions that old Tam Higgins be given a bed and a fire for the winter, the cost to be met from the estate, the source of the kindness not to be named. He sent as well a physician to look at the old man's legs, in case anything at all could yet be done for them. He asked that both errands be carried out as though they had simply happened, the way weather happens, with no benefactor attached. Mrs. Pruitt, who kept the house at Harwick Hall, and had kept it since before Gideon was old enough to remember her doing anything else, received these instructions with the flat calm of a woman who had long since stopped being surprised by the men of that family. "And is his Grace planning to tell anyone his own name while he's about being generous?" she said. "Or will Millbrook go on thinking Mr. Ashe fell out of the sky?" "Not yet," Gideon said. Mrs. Pruitt did not ask why. She had raised him from a boy who cried in secret and let no one see it, and she had learned that the why, with him, generally arrived in its own time, usually after considerable damage had been done to his composure, and none at all to his manners. "There's a girl in this business, I take it?" Gideon did not answer that either. She only smiled and went to see about the fires, and said nothing more, because she had learned that too, over the years, that silence often did more work in that house than speech ever managed. Eliza, meanwhile, heard within the week that old Tam had been given a bed at the almshouse, and a doctor sent to look at his legs, and she was glad of it in the plain, unremarkable way she was glad of most good news, and she never once thought to ask who had arranged it. Kindness, in her experience, mostly arrived without a name attached, because the people who had money enough to be kind rarely troubled themselves to be kind at all. When it happened, she assumed it was the parish, or the rector's wife, or some committee of ladies with nothing better to do with their charity. She did not imagine a duke. She had never in her life had reason to imagine a duke doing anything at all except riding past in a carriage too fast to be thanked. She went on mending. The frost held through the week and then broke, and the town settled back into its ordinary business, and if anyone had told her that the man who had watched her through a church door was even now arranging, in quiet increments, to bring her into his own house, she would have laughed and gone back to her needle, because it was, on the face of it, a preposterous thing to believe. That was the shape of the winter's first secret. There would be others. 3 weeks later a note came to the chandler's shop, addressed to Miss Prentice in a plain, firm hand, asking whether she might undertake some mending for the household at Harwick Hall, the pay to be $1 the day, and her dinner found, the work to begin, if she was willing, on the following Monday. Eliza read it twice.
A shilling the day was more than she had ever been offered for anything, and dinner found besides, and she sat with a letter in her lap for a long while, turning it over, looking for the trick in it, the way a woman looks for the pin left in a mended hem. She found no trick. She only found work, honest work, more of it than she had seen offered in a year, and she wrote back that she would come. She did not know. Walking up the long drive to Harwick Hall on the Monday, with her work-basket on her arm, and her chin set the way it set when she was nervous and did not want it to show, that the gentleman who had sent for her, and who would greet her at the door as plain Mr. Ashe, land agent to the estate, was the same man who had sat above her in the gallery and watched her mend a beggar's blanket in the frost, and that he had arranged every part of this meeting on purpose, for no reason he could yet bring himself to say aloud, even to himself. She thought only that the house was very large, and very cold, in the way that great houses are cold, stone holding winter long after the fields outside have forgotten it, and that the linen closet she was shown to was in a sorry state, years of neglect stacked in cupboards that smelled of lavender gone stale, and damp gone unaddressed. Mr. Ashe will want an account of what can be saved and what must be replaced, the housekeeper told her, a round, dry-voiced woman with sharp eyes who introduced herself only as Mrs. Pruitt. He is particular about waste, doesn't like to see a good cloth thrown out for want of a stitch. Then we shall get along, Eliza said, and Mrs. Pruitt looked at her for a moment longer than the remark seemed to warrant, and something in her face eased, the way a door eases when a swollen frame finally gives. Eliza worked that first day from 8 in the morning until the light failed, sorting linens into 3 piles, save, mend, and gone beyond saving, and she found in the 3rd pile a sheet so fine it had clearly once belonged to a lady long dead, and could not bring herself to throw it out, and mended it instead, on her own time, without being asked. Mr. Ashe came through the linen room once that afternoon, on some pretext about the accounts, and stood a moment in the doorway watching her hands move over the fine sheet before she noticed him. "You needn't trouble with that one," he said. "It was to go to the ragman." "It's good linen," Eliza said, not looking up. "It only wanted turning." "You've saved it, then?" "I generally can, if a thing's given to me before it's past all hope." She glanced up at that, and found him watching her with an attention that unsettled her slightly, though she could not have said why. He was not a handsome man, not in the way the word was generally used. His nose had been broken once and set slightly crooked. His eyes were dark and steady and gave away nothing. But there was something in the stillness of him that made a room feel occupied in a different way than other men occupied it. "You do not ask what it will fetch you," he said, "the saving of it." "I'm paid a shilling the day, sir. That's fetch enough." "Most would have thrown it out and called it a morning's less work." "Most would have," Eliza agreed, and went back to her needle, and did not say what she thought, which was that most people who could afford to waste a fine sheet had never learned what it cost to make one. He did not press her further that day. He only watched her a moment longer and then went out, and Mrs. Pruitt, who had been standing unnoticed in the passage, gave him a long look as he passed that he pretended not to see. That night, over a solitary supper, Gideon told Mrs. Pruitt, in as few words as he could manage, that the woman from the churchyard and the woman in the linen room were the same person, and that he had known it before he ever sent the note. Mrs. Pruitt set down her own supper things very deliberately. "And does she know who she's mending sheets for?" "No." "And when were you meaning to tell her that?" "I don't know yet," Gideon said,
which was, for him, an admission of considerable weakness.
And Mrs. Pruitt understood it as one, and did not press him further that night either, though her look said plainly that she intended to raise it again before the matter was much older. He gave orders, in the days that followed, that Eliza's pay be quietly raised to 1.6 shillings, the difference to be entered in the books as an increase for skilled needlework, and not questioned. He gave orders that a basket of provisions be sent, now and then, to the chandler's shop where she lodged above the shop with her aunt, the gift always attributed to the parish, never to the house. He asked Mrs. Pruitt once, in an offhand way that fooled no one, whether Miss Prentice seemed to want for anything, and was told dryly that Miss Prentice wanted for a great many things, most of which money could not buy her, and that his Grace would do well to remember that before he went about trying to buy them for her regardless. He took the rebuke, because he had learned, over the years, that Mrs. Pruitt's rebukes were generally the ones worth keeping. Eliza, meanwhile, noticed only that the work continued steady through the winter, and that Mr. Ashe was a graver man than most she had met. Quiet in a way that some might have called cold, and she had begun, without quite admitting it to herself, to call something else. He asked her opinion on the linens as though her opinion were worth having. He listened when she spoke, all the way to the end of a sentence, which was more than most gentlemen managed. And once, when she made a dry remark about the vanity of a guest's ruined lace collar, she saw the corner of his mouth move. Not quite a smile, more the shadow one leaves behind, and she found she had wanted, rather badly, to see it happen again. She told herself it was nothing. She was a mending woman, and he was a land agent to a duke. And there the matter began and ended, and she went home each evening to her aunt's small rooms above the chandler's shop, and did not speak of Harwick Hall more than the day's work required. She did not know then that every basket of flour that arrived at her door that winter, every extra shilling folded quietly into her pay, every warm word Mrs. Pruitt offered her in passing, traced back to the same silent source. A man who had seen her kneel in the frost, and decided, in that one unwitnessed quarter hour, that he had found the only true thing he had encountered since he came home to bury his brother. Spring came slow to Millbrook that year, arriving in inches, a green haze over the hedgerows before the frost had fully surrendered the ground beneath them. Eliza had been 3 months in service to the house by the time the daffodils came up along the drive, and in that time she had grown, without quite marking the day it happened, into something like a fixture of Harwick Hall. The maids greeted her by name. Mrs. Pruitt kept a chair by the kitchen fire that had somehow become, without anyone announcing it, hers. It was in that soft early spring that Lady Cordelia Ashe came to stay. She was Gideon's cousin, the daughter of his father's younger brother, and she had grown up half expecting, in the quiet arithmetic that families like theirs performed without ever saying the sums aloud, that she would one day be mistress of Harwick Hall, whether by marriage to Gideon himself or by some other convenient arrangement that kept the house and its income within easy reach of her own branch of the family. She was handsome in the way that money makes handsome easy, and she had a laugh like a struck bell, 3 practiced notes, that she deployed the way other women deployed a fan. She found Eliza in the linen room on a bright morning in April, kneeling over a torn counterpane with pins between her lips, and she stood in the doorway a long moment before she spoke,
the way a cat considers a mouse it is in no hurry to catch. "You are the mending girl," she said. Eliza took the pins from her mouth. "Eliza Prentice, my lady." "Prentice." Lady Cordelia turned the name over as though it tasted of something. "And is it true my cousin has been seen speaking with you, as though you were a person of consequence?" "He has spoken to me about the linens, my lady."
Nothing more. How fortunate for you that there is nothing more to speak of.
The bell laugh came, 3 notes, cool and precise. "You have the hands for this work, I will say that. Red as a washerwoman's. It suits you." Her eyes went over Eliza's plain gown, her mended cuffs, the darn at her elbow that no one but a seamstress would have noticed was a darn at all. "I confess, I cannot imagine what it must be to go through the world with nothing at all to recommend you but a needle. No family, no face to speak of, no fortune. It must be a very small kind of life." Eliza did not answer at once. She set the counterpane down very carefully and folded her red hands in her lap and looked at Lady Cordelia with a steadiness that seemed to surprise them both. "It is a small life, my lady," she said. "I have never claimed otherwise. But I have never gone hungry that I did not earn, and I have never spoken to a soul the way you have just spoken to me. I think, between the 2 smallnesses, I would rather keep mine." Lady Cordelia's smile did not move, but something behind it did. "You forget yourself." "I have not forgotten a single thing," Eliza said, and picked the counterpane back up, and went on with her stitching, and did not look up again until the doorway was empty. She did not cry. She had trained herself, years before, in a house with a dying mother and no money for the doctor, not to cry where it showed, and she held to that training now with the same discipline she brought to her needle. Her hands, when she looked at them a moment later, were shaking very slightly. She set the needle down until they steadied, and then she took it back up, because there was work to finish, and the work did not care what had been said to her in the doorway. Gideon heard of the exchange within the hour, from a housemaid who had overheard it from the passage, and repeated it to Mrs. Pruitt in tones of scandalized delight, and Mrs. Pruitt repeated it in turn to Gideon with considerably less delight and considerably more grimness. He found Eliza still in the linen room, her hands steady again, her face composed, giving no sign at all that anything had passed between her and his cousin. "I understand my cousin was here," he said. "She was, sir." "And that she was unkind to you." "I would have done my work either way, sir. There was no need to trouble you with it." "There is every need," Gideon said, and something in his voice, low and hard, made her set down her needle entirely. "No one under this roof will speak to you in that manner, not while I have any say in who is under this roof at all." She did not know quite what to make of that, coming from a land agent, a man who had no authority, so far as she understood it, over a lady of the family. But she saw that he meant it, every word of it, and she found she believed him more completely than she had believed almost anything in her life. "Thank you," she said. And then, because it seemed the plain and honest thing to add, "You needn't trouble yourself over me, sir. I am used to worse than words." "That," Gideon said quietly, "is precisely the trouble." He did not explain what he meant by that. He only stood a moment longer in the doorway, watching her the way he had watched her in the churchyard, with the same stillness, the same weight behind his silence, And then he went out, and left her turning the strange shape of his anger over in her mind for the rest of the afternoon, unable to account for it, and not entirely willing to try. That evening Gideon confronted his cousin directly in the small drawing-room where she sat at her needlework with a composure Eliza's steadier hands would have shamed. "You will not speak to Miss Prentice in that manner again," he said. "Not in my house." Lady Cordelia looked up, mild as milk. "I only spoke the truth to her. She has nothing. It seemed a kindness, in its way, to tell her plainly, before she formed any expectations that could only end in disappointment." "There is nothing kind in what you said, and we both know it." "Gideon." She set down her work, her voice going soft and reasonable in the way that had once, years ago, half persuaded him she meant well. "You cannot mean to tell me you have taken a fancy to a seamstress."
Think what is owed to this name. Think what your brother would say. "My brother," Gideon said, "spent his whole life thinking what was owed to this name, and precious little time thinking what this name owed to anyone else. I do not intend to make the same mistake." He left her sitting there, her composure intact, her eyes considerably less mild than they had been a moment before. And he did not see, because he did not stay to see it, the way she watched him go with the particular flat calculation of a woman recalculating a sum that has stopped adding up the way she wished it to. She did not stop. She only grew quieter about it, which Mrs. Pruitt, when she heard of the confrontation second-hand, pronounced the more dangerous condition by far. Eliza said nothing more of the matter to anyone, but she found, in the weeks that followed, that she had begun to watch for Mr. Ashe's step in the passage the way she had once watched for her mother's, and she did not know what to call the thing that rose in her chest each time she heard it, and she was, in her plain and unpracticed way, rather afraid of it. The blow, when it came from a different quarter than Eliza had braced for, and it came harder for that. Lady Cordelia did not raise her voice again. She was too clever for that, having learned, in the fortnight since Gideon's rebuke, that direct cruelty earned her nothing but his anger. Instead she waited and watched, and when the spring assembly came round, the one occasion each year when Millbrook's better families and its lesser tradesfolk found themselves briefly under the same roof, she chose her moment with the precision of a woman who had spent a lifetime learning exactly where the weak seam in any garment lay. Eliza had been asked, almost as an afterthought, to help dress the hall with greenery, since her hands were quick and no one else could be spared, and she had stayed late finishing the work, and had not meant to be seen at all among the guests, only to slip out the side door when the last garland was hung. Lady Cordelia found her there instead, in the passage between the hall and the kitchen stair, and made certain, this time, that there were witnesses enough to matter, 3 of the visiting gentry's daughters, and a footman who could be relied upon to repeat every word by morning. "Why, it is the mending girl," she said, in a voice pitched to Carrie. "Come to admire the dancing, I suppose, from the doorway, where such things are generally admired by those who are not invited to join it." Eliza's hands, full of holly and red-berried yew, did not so much as tremble. "I was asked to help with the greenery, my lady. I was on my way home." "Of course you were." Lady Cordelia's smile widened, the bell laugh coming, 3 notes, cool as ever. "Only I could not help but notice, at supper, how very often my cousin's eye finds its way to the kitchen stair. It would be a great pity, would it not, for a man of his position to make a fool of himself over a woman with red hands and no name to speak of. A great pity,
and no small scandal for a house that has had scandal enough already this generation. The gentry's daughters tittered. The footmen looked studiously at the floor. Eliza set down the greenery, very carefully, on the small table by the stair. "I have never asked anything of your cousin, my lady, beyond fair pay for fair work. I do not know what you imagine you have seen, but I will not stand here and be made a jest of for the amusement of women who have never in their lives had to earn a single meal they ate." "How very fine you have grown," Lady Cordelia said, "for a girl who mends beggars' blankets in the churchyard for want of anything better to do with her Sundays." Something in Eliza went very still at that. She had told no one of the blanket, no one at all, and she understood, in the space of that one sentence, that she had been watched far more closely, and for far longer, than she had ever imagined, and by hands she could not yet name. She did not answer. She only picked up her basket, and inclined her head with a dignity that made the gentry's daughters stop their tittering rather abruptly, and walked out of the side door into the cold spring evening without another word, and did not let herself weep until she was 3 streets from the house, in the dark, where no one at all could see her do it. Gideon heard the whole of it within the hour, this time from Mrs. Pruitt herself, whose face when she delivered the account was grimmer than he had seen it in years. "She has gone home," Mrs. Pruitt said. "Walked the whole way, in the dark and the damp. And I'll wager she did not shed a single tear where anyone could see her do it. And that, your grace, is the saddest thing you will hear all evening, though I doubt it's the thing troubling you most." Gideon said nothing for a long moment, then he asked low, "How did Cordelia know of the blanket?" "I couldn't say. Perhaps someone in the town remembered and let it slip in her hearing. Perhaps she has been asking questions of her own." Mrs. Pruitt's eyes were sharp on him. "You mean to go on letting that girl think you're plain Mr. Ashe, while your cousin makes free with knowing more of your business than she does herself?" "No," Gideon said. "I do not mean to go on with that a day longer than I must." But the going on lasted longer than he intended, because the very next morning Eliza sent a short, plain note to Harwick Hall, addressed to Mr. Ashe, thanking him for his kindness in employing her, and informing him that she believed her work there was finished, that the linens were now in good order, and that she would not trouble the house further. She had decided, walking home in the dark the night before, that whatever it was she had allowed herself to feel in that quiet man's presence, it could bring nothing but ruin to them both, and that the only decent thing left to do was to remove herself before it grew into something neither of them could take back. She did not know his rank. She only knew that he stood high enough above her that a cousin thought it worth a public cruelty to warn her off, and she would not be the cause of scandal in a house that had, by all accounts, already borne enough of it. She did not cry writing the note. She was rather proud of that afterward, though the pride cost her a good deal to hold on to. Gideon read it standing in the hall, and Mrs. Pruitt, watching his face, said only, "Well, there it is then. What will you do about it?" "I do not know yet," Gideon said, which was, again, an admission of weakness, and this time Mrs. Pruitt did not let it pass. "Then I will tell you what I know," she said, "since someone in this house had better start speaking plainly. That girl has been the making of every good thing that's happened here since your brother died, and you have let your own cousin drive her out of the house rather than tell her a single true thing about yourself. If you mean to lose her over your own silence, your grace, You will deserve every cold night that follows, and so will I, for having said nothing sooner." She did not soften the words. Gideon did not ask her to. He stood a long while after she had gone, the note still in his hand, and understood, with a particular clarity that only comes to a man after he has already made his mistake, exactly how much silence had cost him, and how little time remained to mend it. He did not go to her that night, though every instinct in him pulled toward the chandler's shop and the small rooms above it. He made himself wait, because he understood that what he owed her now was not haste, but truth, laid out whole and complete, and he would not offer her half of it, wrapped in more urgency than honesty. It was Mrs. Pruitt, in the end, who went to Eliza first, on an errand she did not trouble to disguise as anything but what it was. She found Eliza at her aunt's small table, mending by candlelight, though there was no more work owed to anyone that night, because her hands did not know how to be idle, even when her heart was not in the task. "You'll have heard, I expect, of every unkind thing my lady managed to say," Mrs. Pruitt said, settling herself without being asked, the way she settled herself in most places. "I've come to tell you a few things she left out." Eliza did not look up from her needle. "I have no wish to hear more of Lady Cordelia's opinions, Mrs. Pruitt." "I've not come about her opinions. I've come about her cousin." Mrs. Pruitt folded her hands. "You'll know, I suppose, that old Tam Higgins was given a bed at the almshouse this winter past, and a doctor sent for his legs." "The parish arranged that." "The parish arranged nothing of the kind. There is no parish fund left to arrange a candle, let alone a doctor. That was arranged by Mr. Ashe, on the very evening you mended the blanket in the churchyard, though he never breathed a word of it to a living soul, and would not thank me for telling you now, except that I have decided he has earned considerably less say in the matter than he thinks." Eliza's needle stopped. "And the flower that came to your door this winter, and the extra shilling that found its way into your pay, without any account given for it, and the wages your aunt's landlord suddenly found himself paid a full quarter early on, with no name attached. That was all the same hand. He has been quietly mending this whole town for a year, Miss Prentice, the way you mend a blanket, so that no one can find the seam. And he has done it because of what he saw you do in that churchyard, before either of you had exchanged a single word." "He saw me." Eliza's voice had gone very quiet. "He was there." "He was in the gallery pew," Mrs. Pruitt said, "the very morning you knelt in the frost. And he has not been able to think of much else since, though it has taken him a deal longer to say so than it ought." Eliza sat with that a long moment, the needle idle in her lap, her mind going back over every quiet thing Mr. Ashe had said to her in the linen room, every look she had not been able to account for, every kindness she had assumed came from the parish, or from luck, or from nowhere at all. "Why did he not tell me?" she said at last. "Because he is a man who has been given every reason in his life to distrust anyone who wanted anything from him," Mrs. Pruitt said, gentler now. "And he wished, more than he has wished for anything in a long while, to be certain that whatever you felt for him, if you came to feel anything at all, was felt for the man and not the name. He has made a great many mistakes about how to go about that, but the wanting behind it was never anything but honest. And I have known him since he was a boy who cried when no one could see him do it either.
And I will tell you plainly, Miss Prentice, I have never once known him to be cruel." Eliza looked down at her own hands, red and steady now, and thought of the churchyard, and the frost, and the blanket, and the man in the shadowed gallery who had watched her ask for nothing, and had spent a year quietly giving her everything he could, without his name attached to any of it. She did not say she forgave him. She did not yet know if there was anything to forgive. But something in her had already begun to soften toward the shape of the truth, even before she had heard the whole of it from his own mouth. And she sat a long while after Mrs. Pruitt had gone, turning it over, until the candle had burned down nearly to the dish. He came to her the next evening, to her aunt's small rooms above the chandler's shop, and asked, through the landlady, whether Miss Prentice would grant him a quarter hour. She met him in the small parlour her aunt kept for callers, a narrow, warm room with one good chair and a fire banked low. And she did not sit, and neither did he, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. "I understand Mrs. Pruitt has already told you the greater part of it," Gideon said. "I would rather you heard the rest from me." "Then say it," Eliza said. Her voice was steady. Her hands, folded in front of her, were not. "My name is Gideon Ash," he said. "That much I gave you honestly, from the first. What I did not give you was the whole of it. I am the Duke of Harwick. I have been since my brother died, and I came home to Millbrook a year ago, meaning to sit quietly in my own church and think about nothing at all. And instead, I sat in the gallery and watched a woman kneel in the frost to mend a beggar's blanket, expecting nothing for it, wanting nothing for it, refusing even to be thanked for it. I had not, in all my life, seen anyone do such a thing, with no one of consequence watching to see it done." "You were watching," Eliza said. "I was watching, and I did not tell you, after, because I wished to see what you would do when you believed no man of rank could see you at all. That is the only test I have ever trusted, Miss Prentice, not what a person does before an audience. What they do when they are certain there is none." He drew a breath. "You passed it 100 times over before I ever gave you the chance to know you were being tested. And I am ashamed, now, of how long I let the game run past the point where it was any longer honest." Eliza was quiet a long moment. "You let your cousin humiliate me in a public hall rather than simply tell me the truth." "Yes." He did not flinch from it. "That is the worst of what I have to answer for, and I will not pretend otherwise to spare myself. I should have told you the day she first spoke to you unkindly. I told myself I was protecting you from a scandal not yet ready to be born. I have come to understand, since, that I was protecting my own comfort and calling it your welfare, and there is no dignity in that kind of cowardice, whatever title a man wears while he practices it. Why tell me the truth now and not before?" "Because I would rather lose you honestly," Gideon said, "than keep you by half measures one day longer. I do not ask you to forgive the silence tonight. I do not ask you to answer me at all tonight, if you are not ready. I will ask again in the spring proper, when the frost is fully gone, and your no will be as safe with me as your yes, whichever you come to give me. I have no wish to be chosen because you feel you must. I would rather have your honest no than a yes given out of gratitude or fear, or the weight of my name pressing on you where it has no business pressing."
Eliza looked at him a long while in the firelight, this grave, plain-spoken man who had watched her from a shadowed pew and spent a year quietly mending a whole town without once asking to be thanked for it. And she found, to her own surprise, that the anger she had carried up the stairs with her had already begun, of its own accord, to lay itself down. "You might have simply told me who you were," she said, "the day you asked me to mend your linens." "I might have," Gideon agreed. "I did not trust myself to know, then, whether I wanted the truth told for your sake or for my own comfort. I trust it now. That is the only difference. And I know it is a poor excuse for a year of silence." "It is a poor excuse," Eliza said. But she said it without heat, and something in her voice had already begun to forgive what her words had not yet caught up to admitting. And Gideon, watching her, did not press for more than that. He only bowed and thanked her for hearing him out, and left her standing by the low fire with the whole shape of the truth finally laid bare between them, and no more crowding it than that. She did not sleep well that night, but she did not, for the first time in a fortnight, lie awake feeling that some vital piece of the world had been kept from her. The withholding, at least, was over, and whatever came next, she thought, would come to her whole and plain, the way she had always tried to give it to others. Spring finished its arrival in the weeks that followed, the hedgerows going properly green, the frost gone at last from the mornings, and Eliza returned to Harwick Hall, not as a favor granted, but as a woman who had chosen, with clear eyes now, to go on working there. And Gideon kept his word, and did not press her further than the plain fact of his presence, patient, in a way she had not expected from a man of his rank. It was Mrs. Pruitt who told her, one afternoon over the mending basket, of the full account of the year's secret kindnesses, the debts quietly settled, the doctor's bills paid without a name attached, the rent forgiven for 3 families in the town who had never known who to thank for it. "He has never once let his name be spoken over any of it," Mrs. Pruitt said. "Asked me particular every time that it go down in the books as parish charity. I told him once he was a fool for it. He said a good deed, with his name stitched to it, was worth less to him than one plain done. I have never forgotten him saying that." Eliza thought of her own needle and her own invisible stitches, and understood, more completely than any confession could have made her understand, exactly what kind of man she had given her trust to. Lady Cordelia did not remain much longer at Harwick Hall. Gideon told her plainly, within the week, that her welcome there was at an end, that he would settle a small independence on her as his father would have wished, but that she would take it in Bath, or wherever else she pleased, so long as it was not under his roof. She left with her bell laugh considerably diminished, and word came back to Millbrook, months later, that she had made a tolerable match with a gentleman of modest fortune, who had never once heard the particulars of why she left her cousin's house so suddenly, and Millbrook, on the whole, did not miss her. It was on a warm evening in early June, in the same small parlor above the chandler's shop, that Gideon came to Eliza a second time and asked, at last, the question he had promised to wait for. He did not kneel. He only stood before her, plain and grave as he had always been, and took her hand, and drew the glove from it finger by finger, slowly, as though the doing of it mattered as much as anything he meant to say. "I love you," he said. "Not for the blanket you mended, though I have thought of that morning every day since I saw it. I love you for the plain truth you have never once softened for my comfort, and the kindness you have never once expected to be repaid. I would rather have your no freely given than a yes offered because you feel my name presses on you. Tell me plainly, Eliza, what is your answer?" "Yes," Eliza said. It was, she found, the only word she needed. "It was always going to be yes. I only wanted to be asked as myself, and not as the woman who mended Mr. Ash's linens." "You were always asked as yourself," Gideon said. "There was never any other woman I meant to ask." He kissed her bare hand where the glove had been, and she did not draw it back. And for a long moment neither of them said anything further, because there was nothing further, just then, that needed saying. The wedding, when it came in high summer, was smaller than Millbrook expected of a duke, and grander than Eliza had ever thought to see for herself, which was, Mrs. Pruitt observed dryly, exactly the right size for two people who had never much cared for show. A year later, almost to the week, Eliza sat by the fire in the small parlor at Harwick Hall that had become, by unspoken agreement, entirely her own, and Gideon sat across from her, and between them, on a low stool, lay a folded gray wool blanket, mended so finely along its old seam that no one but its owner could have said where the tear had ever been. It was not Tam's blanket. Tam had a new one now, warm and whole, one of a full chest of blankets Eliza had seen sent, that winter, to every bed in the almshouse. The gift entered in the books under no name at all, because some habits, once learned properly, are never entirely given up. This one was theirs. Gideon had asked her, that first winter of their marriage, to mend a torn blanket from his own boyhood bed, the one thing left him of a house that had once, before grief and silence took hold of it, been a warm place, and she had done it exactly as she had done Tam's, with small, sure stitches and no fuss at all. He reached across and took her bare hand in his, and she let him, and neither of them let go for a long while, the fire popping once, low, and a rook somewhere beyond the window calling a single note into the dark, and falling silent after, as if it too had said the only thing worth saying, and saw no reason to repeat itself. A person's worth, it is said, is never proved by what they do when the whole world is watching. It is proved only by what they do when they believe no one of consequence can see them at all. What a story that was to sit with, the mending of a stranger's blanket in the cold, unwatched, becoming the very thing that built a whole life of warmth around it. If a tale of quiet kindness finding its reward is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you when it's ready. And I would love to know, in the comments below, what small kindness you have done in your own life that you never expected anyone to see or to reward. Tell me about it, if you're willing to share. Thank you for staying with Eliza and her Duke all the way to the fireside at the end. There is another story waiting just around the corner, and I hope you will be here for it.